You remember how I said I don't collect helmets? I don't collect ships either. Hello there, welcome back to the channel. I am Grand Moff Tony. You know, the spaceships in Star Wars are pretty much integral to the whole series. I think part of what makes Star Wars so cool and so appealing is the wide variety of spaceships that you see portrayed in the various different medias. There are some really cool ships in Star Wars. And the problem as a Star Wars fan and someone who also likes collecting things has always been, how do you represent those ships within your collection? Now, back when I was a kid, I had a bunch of the vehicle playsets that would come with, you get one or two figures, you get a vehicle like the Slave One, or you get the Millennium Falcon, or one of the other various famous ships from Star Wars. But there was always a little part of my mind that was always like, it's not really in scale though, is it? It's not really accurate, you know, annoying little nerd twitches like that. You'd look at, say, my Jango Fett Slave 1 playset, and you'd be able to look at it and say, yeah, you can put Jango in the pilot seat, but that's not how he gets in the ship, is it? He gets in through here, and there's no way this figure is going in that gap. Now, the Black Series, of course, had vehicles as far back as the Blue Line, with the original Scout Trooper on the speeder bike, and it met with mixed results, usually in terms of poor sales, all the way through to the First Order Special Forces TIE Fighter, which I have a glaring memory in my head of walking away from for $49.99 in Toys R Us in Bristol that still haunts me, all the way to the Snowspeeder for the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back that you see here on my left. At that point, a combination of the rule of two, thereby being that because of the scale of the Black Series and the immense size of these vehicles, you could only really produce vehicles that could hold one or two characters, because anything bigger than that would be too big for the Black Series, and the disappointing sales that came along with them, with people waiting for clearance that we were all guilty of. It pretty much put the final nail in the coffin for the Black Series vehicle line, and you know, we miss it to this day. So the question then becomes, okay, so if I want to have vehicles represented in my collection, how can I go about doing that? Well, the Vintage collection has a wide range of vehicles that you can purchase. Everything from X-Wings to the Slave One, all the way up to Jabba's sail barge. But the problem for me with the Vintage collection vehicles comes down to the size. They are so big and they take up so much space that, as someone who predominantly collects just the characters, while I may want to have vehicles in my collection, I don't want them to dominate my space. I was a big fan of the Micro Machines vehicles back in the day for this exact reason, actually. They were very small, very lightly detailed, the scale was very loose, but it did what I wanted it to do. Another solution I came up with was the Star Wars X-Wing Miniatures game, which you can see I have the Ghost over here on my right. But they're so expensive, and they come with so many game components for a game that I don't really enjoy, and I've only really played a couple of times, and it just didn't connect with me in the way that the larger scale game Star Wars Armada did. Well, enter the Star Wars Micro Galaxy Squadrons line, a line of highly detailed, interactive Star Wars vehicles on the perfect scale. They are big enough to include an immense amount of detail and interactivity, but small enough that they don't take up a ton of space on your display shelf. And as much as I like to harp on about the fact that, you know, the Black Series figures is my only real collection, that's the only one that I am dedicated to collecting, over the past few months I have found myself drawn more and more to these vehicles, because I have loved every single one that I've picked up for different reasons. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you about the Micro Galaxy Squadrons vehicles that I've added to my collection, and why I think this line is so great. Now, I vaguely remember the order that I got these ships in, but it's fair to say that I keep a much tighter grip on my collecting habits in the Black Series. I mean, I don't have a color-coded spreadsheet for my Micro Galaxy Squadrons collection. I've got one for my Black Series. But in a loose, as I remember it, no particular order kind of way, let's have a look at my ship collection. Kicking things off rather appropriately with my first edition, it was the first one. It's the Millennium Falcon. This was the launch edition set that came out, and I saw it in Target. I knew it was coming. I'd seen it on Instagram, but when I saw it on the shelf in Target, I just couldn't leave it there. I knew it would probably come down in price one day because it was like practically week one of the release, but I saw it, I saw the detail, and all of a sudden it just took me back to my Micro Machines days, and I just couldn't leave it there. This thing is beautiful. I think we forget sometimes just how big the Millennium Falcon is. There is a whole little world in here. It's incredible, and this being the first one that they released, they put in lights, they put in sounds, they included so many little minifigures and so many little features on this ship to really entice you into the line, and it worked. I bought it. I've been buying into the line ever since. The Falcon's real selling point is its incredible detail. This thing looks awesome. If you compare this to the X-Wings miniature that I was considering getting as my Millennium Falcon representation, this just blows it out of the water. It's bigger, it is more interactive, you can pull the top off of it and actually move the miniatures around inside, and obviously toy experts have shown that that's what really sells an action figure of a ship, is the ability to actually put the little minifigures inside the ship and whoosh it around the room like a 6-year-old. And the great thing about this set is you can play inside it and it doesn't take up half of your living room while you're doing it. I've had Millennium Falcon playsets that obviously had massive interactive insidey parts, but they were all huge, and all of them have been left behind in some way or another because you just run out of space. There's nowhere to put them. This is a perfect combination of the two things. You've got perfect detail and perfect scaling. It's great. I have never looked back. This was the first one that I bought, and I am so glad that I did. Next up, we have the Razor Crest from The Mandalorian. This was another one that I saw it on Instagram in the run-up to the line's release, and I wanted it straight away because the HasLab Razor Crest was something that I was never really going to buy into. If I'm going to drop that kind of money, it's going to be for a ship that I care a lot more about. But this was perfect for what I wanted as a representation of the Razor Crest. The size is perfect. It comes with the Mandalorian and the teeniest, tiniest Grogu that you've ever seen. And there are so many different components to it. You can open up the inside cargo area and you can mess around with the various carbonite frozen bounties that are hanging inside. The entire cockpit lifts up and you can place the figures inside and fly around the room just like you always wanted to. There's no lights and sounds on this, and I'm pretty sure lights and sounds aren't in a majority of the rest of these figures, but you don't really need it. This is absolutely fantastic, frankly. Just the way that you can have this parked on your shelf and it just looks so true to screen accuracy. It just looks great. Obviously, it continues the trend from the Falcon of being perfect scaling and incredibly intricate detail. I absolutely love it. This is the kind of thing that I would have loved to have as an 8 or 9-year-old if it weren't for the fact that the Mandalorian wouldn't exist for like 20 years. I didn't go for the HasLab, but I scooped this up without a second thought. Razor Crest is awesome. This is going to be the first instance of cheating for the sake of pacing, but moving on, we also have both Boba Fett and Jango Fett's Slave One. What a ship. I mean, this was the ship that even I had when I was a kid. I had Jango's Slave One because obviously me and Boba never really got on back in the day, but this is the Book of Boba Fett Slave One, so it comes with Boba and Fennec, so obviously I'm going to pick this up in no time at all. And of course, the thing that these two ships have going for them is this incredible interactive play feature where you can simply stand them up and they shift into flight mode without you having to mess around with them. I remember the Slave One that I had as a kid, you could stand it upright, but you still had to go in and move those wings. And if you look inside the cockpit, you can actually see the entire cockpit assembly shuffle and shift itself into flight mode. It is so cool. This is really all I needed. I bought Boba's Slave One first, but then, in a rather funny little anecdote, we noticed that the value of Jango's Slave One had absolutely spiked on the aftermarket, and I had seen it in my local Target. So I popped down there and picked it up thinking, what a bargain. Well, the value immediately dropped back down to normal, so that was on me. But these two ships are incredible. Both of them feature fully screen accurate insides. They both feature little hidden flaps on the back with seismic charges poking out, and they're just awesome. These are great. I can't even put it into words. As someone who never liked Boba Fett back in the day and has rediscovered a love for him in later days, and always thought that Jango was the cooler of the two Fetts, these are just fantastic, and I absolutely love them. But it's not just freighters and gunships that this line does so well. They also knock fighters out of the park. This is Darth Vader's TIE Advanced Mark I and Luke Skywalker's Red 5 X-Wing. And this really demonstrates what I mean by these are the perfect size for ship representation in your collection. They have said more than once that they did run a prototype for a Black Series X-Wing, and it was just far too big to produce. Look how perfect and compact this X-Wing is. It comes with a little Luke, it comes with a little R2, you can lock the S-foils in attack position to your heart's content, and Vader's TIE is just as cool. It comes with a little Darth Vader. You do have to take his cape off before you can get him into his seat, but I'm pretty sure if you watch the movie, he has to take his cape off as well, so I don't mind it. Rather typically, I haven't picked up any TIE fighters yet, except for this one, and this was the one that I really wanted, because this was back when I wasn't really sure if I was collecting these yet, but I've always loved Vader's TIE Advanced. It is just so cool, and you can run around your living room recreating the trench run scene over and over again until your wife tells you to stop. Beyond that, I love this little play feature on this X-Wing where you can press underneath R2 and it will lift him up and out of the ship, just like you see him do in the movies. It is so cool just how much screen accuracy they can get into this. Not just how they look, but how they function. The fact that you don't, like, take the front off the TIE fighter to get Vader in. You have to open this little hatch to get him in there, just like they do in the movie. It's fantastic, and I absolutely love it. Speaking of screen accuracy, we've got Jedi Starfighters. Now, talk about some utterly brilliant screen-accurate accessories that you can throw in these sets. The Jedi Starfighters come with the hyperspace rings. I just think that's fantastic. It's a little intricate to get them locked on there, and I was a little worried about this one in particular, but this is Obi-Wan Kenobi's Jedi Starfighter from Attack of the Clones, and Ahsoka Tano's Jedi Starfighter from the early seasons of Clone Wars. You know, when I got Jango's Slave 1, I just had to get Obi-Wan's Jedi Starfighter just because the chase scene through the asteroid field is one of my favourite moments from Attack of the Clones, so that had to happen. And I heard that the Ahsoka Tano Jedi Starfighter is either a chase variant or it's a limited edition variant. I found it, snapped it up, and now it's on my shelf. I love these ships. I had a full-size one of these, without the hyperspace rings, of course, back when I was a kid, and it came with a little Obi-Wan Kenobi figure. Like I said, it didn't have the hyperspace rings. It had this weird sort of gimmick where you could, like, hit a button and it would open up the wings that the Jedi Interceptors have in Revenge of the Sith, and I guess, like, it would lose some of its shell and reveal extra weapons. They advertised it as, like, an attack variant or battle damage, but I always thought it was cool. It was one of my favourite ships, so these were fantastic to add to the collection. I think they are brilliant. Getting to some more recent additions to the collection now, we have Bo-Katan's Gauntlet Starfighter from The Mandalorian. This is just fantastic. When I saw it, I was like, I want two things out of this. I want to be able to put the fins up so that I can land it, and it can do it, and I want the cockpit section of the ship to be able to rotate, which it can, and I am incredibly happy. This was an awesome addition to the line, and I think it's an awesome addition to my collection as well. I've always loved these Starfighters ever since I saw them back in the day when I was watching Rebels, and they are just brilliant. Seeing them in live action was one thing, and now I've got my own Gauntlet Starfighter to run around the room with. I just think they're brilliant. There's such an intricate and unique design to the way these wings work. They didn't have to knock the ball out of the park and include a screen-accurate landing cycle, but they did. This is the kind of stuff that, as a nerdy Star Wars fan, I look for, and I thoroughly appreciate. Plus, it's another way to get another Bo-Katan into my collection, because you can never have too much Bo-Katan. This thing's awesome. Moving on to another bigger ship, we have this. This is the Havoc Marauder from the Bad Batch. I love this ship. It is very quickly moving up my top 10 rankings of ships in Star Wars that I absolutely adore. I love how it reminds me of the old Tidarian shuttle with its landing sequence, and I'm so attached to it because I love the Bad Batch, I love these characters, and this is their home. I love it when a ship in Star Wars feels like a character's home, and this is their home. I'm incredibly attached to this ship just because I'm incredibly attached to these characters. I love the Bad Batch so much, and adding the Havoc Marauder to my collection, it just makes me so happy. I've always wanted to be able to like suspend it over my Bad Batch display in a similar way that I've got the Ghost hanging out by my Phoenix crew. I'd love to have the Havoc Marauder like just hanging out in the background of my Bad Batch display. I think that would just look so cool. This is another winner for immense attention to detail. The screen accuracy of the inside of this ship is just out of this world. You can go all the way up the back to where Omega's little room is, and you can open this hatch on the back to place a little figure inside there. It is so cool. It's fantastic. I love it so much. The Marauder really feels like the last member of the cast of the Bad Batch. Like, it's not just a ship, it's got a personality, it's a character in its own right. And just being able to add this ship to my collection, it's not something I would have ever been able to do if they were just stuck to Black Series vehicles, because let's face it, this would have been immense. It would have been awesome, but it would have been too big. It's perfectly detailed, it's the perfect size. I've said it more than once for this collection. This is perfect. And finally, for those Clone Wars fans out there, the Micro Galaxy Squadrons have you covered. It's the Republic Lat gunship. These things are so cool. They've done multiple different variants of them. This is the Crumb Bomber and the Separatist Nightmare. These are the two that I've been able to find so far, and each of them comes with a little accompanying bark speeder that you can put a little clone trooper on. They're fantastic. You can remove the shutters from the side of the cargo area. These beam cannon weapons on the side are fully maneuverable, and these cannons on the front are on the most incredibly satisfying ball joints. They're just fantastic. I'm a big fan of the Clone Wars, and I love the way that each Legion like personalize their vehicles and their armor, and this is a great way to represent that on my shelf. Obviously, once again, these things would be immense in Black Series scale. There are people in the community that have 3D printed their own Black Series scale gunships, and they are immense in size and they are very, very cool, but they would take up so much space that it's just not something that I can practically do. But these fill that gap in my collection absolutely perfectly. So I will remain a massive advocate for these figures. Obviously, the cockpit area opens up. You can also remove these panels at the back by the engines to reveal the missiles, like you see in the Battle of Geonosis and Attack of the Clones. They're just awesome. I don't know how many times I can get away with saying that all of these ships are just awesome. I made the comparison at the start to the fact that I don't collect helmets, but I am way more open about the fact, you know what, I do collect these. These are brilliant. I will always go to their section in the various toy shops that I visit, and I will always just linger a little bit longer, like, is today the day that I buy a TIE Fighter? Do I get a TIE Fighter today? Because I need a TIE Fighter. Or my hand will hover over a larger vehicle for just a little longer, and you know what? They have some great vehicles coming down the line. I saw an AT-AT. They're bringing one of those out. I'm gonna need that. This is just a fantastic way to get vehicles represented on your shelf. Obviously, we would all love to have Black Series scale vehicles, but I think the more I think about it, the more I realize it's incredibly impractical, both for Hasbro to produce them and for me as a collector to have these giant vehicles on display. But if I have to settle, this is a fantastic way to settle. I love this line so much. The attention to detail, the variety of ships that are available. I think the only problem I have with them is the blind boxes for the very, very small vehicles. I don't like blind boxes. I've never liked blind boxes. I like to know what I'm paying for and what I'm getting before I pick it up. So I haven't picked up any of those, and if it comes to it, I will probably just overpay on eBay and pay for someone who's selling like a complete set of them. As someone who grew up with Micro Machines playsets and was desperately looking for a way to include vehicles in my collection in some way or another, the Micro Galaxy Squadron line, it hit everything I wanted. Impeccable detail, fantastic scaling, it's just awesome. I think this line has immense potential. Like, I don't know how big we can go for the vehicles. Like, could we see the Naboo Royal Starship one day, or is that too big? I don't know. I'd love to see the Stinger Mantis. That would be incredible. I can picture in my head this full 360 turning fin that you can just position however you want it, the way it moves around gracefully in the game. We could see the Ghost. I know there's a rumor going around that the Ghost is going to be the next Vintage Collection HasLab, and I'm both secretly really hoping it is and secretly dreading it being a HasLab because it's the Ghost. I'm gonna have to get it. But realistically, we could get a Micro Galaxy Squadron Ghost. That would be a brilliant way to get my second favorite Star Wars ship of all time into this line. Obviously, we still have to find ways to get the biggest ships in Star Wars represented in our collections. I use the Star Wars Armada game for that. I mean, I play Armada, but when I'm done playing, I just put the miniatures on my shelves, and, you know, I've got the Executor, I've got my favorite ship, which is the ISD Chimera. I've also got like a 2-foot long custom model of the Chimera, just because it is my favorite ship. I don't think we'd ever see those ships come to this line because you're looking at the same sort of difference in size as you get from a Black Series figure to a Black Series vehicle. But for fighters to small-sized freighters, the Micro Galaxy Squadrons line is the perfect Star Wars vehicle line. So that was a brief little walk around my Star Wars Micro Galaxy Squadrons collection. Any of you out there into this line, what are your thoughts on it? Someone out there who's on the fence that maybe needs a little bit more convincing besides a long old video of me rambling about how great these things are? Do you have a ship that you would love to see come to this line? Obviously, I've said the Stinger Mantis or the Ghost. I would buy a Ghost in a heartbeat. Why isn't there one already? I'm getting Black Series wishlist vibes of this line of thought. So yeah, let me pass this topic off to you. What are your thoughts on this line? What are some vehicles you'd love to come to it? I'm always interested to hear your thoughts. By the time you see this, I will be getting packed up and ready for my trip to the UK, and next week we will be looking at my top 5 wish list for characters from Obi-Wan Kenobi that I would love to see come to the Black Series. We're getting back onto the Black Series. It's all good. This is a Star Wars channel, but we talk about Star Wars toys a lot. In the meantime, however, I've been Grand Moff Tony. That was an introduction to my Micro Galaxy Squadron collection. You may subscribe when ready. Oh my god, that probably sounds awful on the microphone. Just freight... What is that? Is that a hair? Oh crap, I left the landing gear on. From